You won't believe what just happened to me. I was standing on my own property, my shoreline, my dock, my pool, when this woman I'd never seen before marched up like she ran the neighborhood and called the cops on me. No joke. And here's the wildest part. She had no right to be there in the first place. It started like any other quiet Saturday morning. The sky had just started to blush with early sunlight, and the water shimmered with golden ripples stretching across the lake. I was out walking my dog along the shoreline of my lakefront property, the place I'd inherited from my grandfather. This land has been in my family for generations. We own the lot, the house, the dock, the pool, and yes, even the shoreline, which is actually pretty rare around here. Most people assume the lakefront is public access or shared with an HOA, but mine isn't. I've got every bit of paperwork to prove it. The deed, a fresh survey, tax records, all of it. My grandfather had bought this land back when lakefront properties were still affordable for working families. Since inheriting it last year, I've been investing a lot of time and effort into upgrading it. Solar pumps, a rebuilt dock, and new fencing around the pool for safety and aesthetics. That morning, I just finished inspecting the solar equipment down near the dock when I noticed someone pacing near the pool. At first glance, I figured maybe it was someone from the filter company I'd hired a few weeks ago, or perhaps a neighbor dropping by unannounced. But then I saw her. She wore tight black yoga pants, oversized sunglasses, and a pink sun visor. She had the posture and facial expression of someone who expected the world to yield at her command, arms crossed, foot tapping, lips pursed. The moment she saw me, she raised her voice. "Excuse me," she barked. "What exactly do you think you're doing here?" I blinked at her, stunned. I live here. This is my property." She scoffed, loud and exaggerated. "Don't lie. I've lived in this community for 15 years. I know everyone who actually belongs. And I've never seen you before." She started strutting up the steps toward the pool, her sandals smacking against the stone like a gavel delivering judgment. I was too thrown to react at first. How does someone just walk onto private property and act like you're the intruder? "Ma'am," I said, calmly but firmly, "this property isn't part of the HOA. It's independently owned. I can show you the deed if you'd like." "Nice try," she snapped, hands still on hips. "All lakefront properties are subject to HOA regulations. That means the dock and pool are communal assets, and you don't get to block people out." That's when I realized what I was dealing with, one of those people. A full-fledged HOA Karen. The kind who believes proximity equals ownership, and everything in sight belongs to her because of some unwritten neighborhood hierarchy. I started pulling up the scanned documents on my phone, but before I could even open the file, she whipped out her own phone and started dialing. "You've got 10 seconds to leave before I call the police," she said with a smirk. "You're trespassing," I said, stepping forward, still keeping my tone even. "You have absolutely no right to be here." She didn't even flinch. Instead, she hit dial and told the dispatcher, "Yes, I'm at the community pool. There's a man here being aggressive and pretending he owns it." I feel unsafe. I stood there speechless. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't moved aggressively, hadn't done anything but exist on my own land. Yet here she was, fabricating a scenario and calling the police as if I were the intruder. 15 minutes later, 2 police officers showed up. They were professional, calm, but clearly ready for confrontation. One walked toward me as I stood by the dock, arms crossed, while she waved them down from the pool deck like she was directing traffic at a parade. "That's him," she shouted. "That's the man I told you about." The officer asked for my ID. I handed over my license and, without raising my voice, explained that this was my home and private property. I showed him the deed, survey scans, tax records, everything. The second officer approached her. "Ma'am, do you have any documentation to support your claim that this land is HOA managed?" "Well, no," she stammered. "But it's always been open to the neighborhood. That's how it works around here." "That doesn't make it public property," he replied. "Unless the HOA has a recorded deed or easement on file, this is considered private land." Her face turned the color of overripe tomatoes. "But I've seen people use it before. And they were likely guests," I added. "Which is perfectly fine. But you were not invited." She pressed her lips together so hard they practically vanished. The officers gave her a final warning. Walk away peacefully or be cited for trespassing. She chose defiance. So they rode her up. She stomped down the gravel path like a toddler denied candy, muttering about entitled people ruining the neighborhood and new money arrogance. One officer lingered a moment and asked, "This happen often?" "More than it should," I said. "Folks think anything visible is up for grabs." After they left, I sat on the edge of the dock with my dog beside me, watching the lake shimmer. The whole thing felt surreal. I'd gone out to check solar pumps and ended up defending my property from an entitled stranger with a phone. But the story didn't end there. 2 days later, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was supposedly from the HOA. I'm not even a member. The subdivision stops 3 lots down. My property sits outside their jurisdiction. Still, there it was. A letter with no official letterhead, typed in Comic Sans of all things. We are writing to formally request that you remove the fencing around your pool, as it creates the appearance of exclusivity and limits access to shared neighborhood features. I laughed so hard I almost dropped it in the lake. Not only was the demand absurd, it was illegal. No HOA can enforce rules on land outside their boundary. Still, I called my lawyer just to be sure. He confirmed what I already knew. I owed them nothing. So I drafted a polite but direct response. This property is privately owned and not subject to your HOA's authority. Continued contact may result in legal action for harassment. I figured that would end it. It didn't. The woman, whose name I eventually learned was Paige, took her vendetta online. She flooded the local Facebook group with wild accusations. Called me the pool hoarder. Accused me of stealing community property. Claimed I was hoarding access to the dock. I wouldn't have known if a neighbor hadn't sent me screenshots. At first, I ignored it. But when I saw people asking questions, starting to wonder if she was telling the truth, I knew I had to respond. So I recorded a video. I walked the property, narrated it calmly, pointed to the boundary markers, read from the deed, showed historical records. I titled it, Setting the Record Straight, My Land, My Rights. The video spread like wildfire. Turns out, a lot of neighbors had their own stories about Paige. Notes on their doors. Complaints about lawn decor. One woman said Paige reported her for planting a non-regulation color of petunias. The floodgates opened. People started coming up to me at the store. Hey, saw your video. Glad someone finally stood up to her. I went from being that guy on the lake to the guy who stood his ground. Eventually, the HOA board issued a formal statement. Paige did not represent them, had no authority to speak on their behalf, and that they recognized my property was fully private. She was removed from her community coordinator role, an unofficial title she'd given herself, and banned from the group for spreading false information. I wish I could say that was the last time I ever saw her. But people like Paige don't go away that easily. She still walks her tiny dog past my fence, glaring like I destroyed her world. I just wave and smile. Because here's the truth. When you stand your ground and know your rights, when you protect what's yours without yelling or threats, the truth finds its way to the surface. And bullies like Paige hate the truth more than anything. So next time someone tries to intimidate you out of your own space, ask them for proof. Stay calm. Be respectful. But don't back down. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be right.